today. Director Tasha and Nate, thank you so much for being with us today. Danny's away at a convention this week, so we'll stay prayerful for their safe journey and return, and all those good things besides. Those who are going to the fest this afternoon, we'll pray that the rain holds out, and if you get out there, take a look at the fence. There's a giant fence that's been built. I think the Family Center has a couple of boards on it. The parish will have some boards on it. So if you go out there, please look for Fatima name in lights if you so do that. As we gather today, we come back to the Gospel of Matthew. Remember, we left off last week. Jesus had heard of John the Baptist passing, was trying to get away to pray and reflect. He needed some quiet time. And as he was making his way to find that quiet space, everybody followed him. And as they were confronted by the late hour of the day after Jesus had been preaching, the disciples were told by Jesus to give the crowd something to eat. And with 5 loaves and 2 fish, they fed over 5,000 people. So we come to the end of that story now, and at the end of that event, after Jesus finished preaching, and now he has simply had enough. He sends the disciples in the boat, go on home, leave me alone. He dismisses the crowds, thank you very much. And Jesus makes his way further up the mountain's top to get away, to find some quiet place so he can finally be alone and pray. You know, it was still so important to Jesus to find that quiet space, that quiet moment where he could commune with God. And how important that was, not only for Jesus, but we see it also in the first reading from the book of Kings and the prophet Elijah. Remember what's happening with Elijah. Elijah had just confronted Jezebel about her husband, the king, erecting the giant statue of Baal in the Holy of Holies, in the temple. They desecrated the temple, and he was just beside himself. So Elijah continues to prophesy against Jezebel and the king, and she is very upset. So what happens then? Remember, Elijah challenges Jezebel's prophets, the prophets of Baal, to call upon their God, and Elijah would call upon the God of Israel, and to see who answered their prayers. And remember the whole taunting that goes on as Elijah says to them, well, you know, maybe your God's sleeping, so pray louder. And they begin to dance around and cut themselves and go into a frenzy until finally the God of Israel comes down and swoops up the whole sacrifice, and the prophets of Baal are ordered killed by Elijah. Jezebel has had it. And so now she is after Elijah to take his life. And so Elijah has gone up to the mountaintop to try to find some comfort and peace from God, because he's at his wit's end. He's done everything he's been asked to do, and now he's tired, and now he fears for his life. So he goes to the mountaintop to commune with God. And he's in that cave, and as the story goes, the mighty winds come by. God is not in the wind. The earthquake comes by, and God is not there. The fire comes by, and God is not there. But in quiet, a whisper, Elijah encounters God. If you want to capture someone's attention, we know it well. We know it well. You know, it's all good. It's all good. You know, we can be in a room with 1,000 people, everybody talking at the top of their voice, and the moment someone lowers their voice next to the person next to them, you know, suddenly we all want to hear. It is in those quiet moments that God finally reveals himself and speaks to Elijah. It's in the quiet on the mountaintop that Jesus communes with the Father and is able to regroup and reorganize himself so he can come back down off of that mountaintop. And where does he find the disciples? In the boat, on the sea, tossed about. And it says in the scriptures today that Jesus comes to them in the 4th watch. If you know anything about ancient timekeeping, it's in those last hours of the morning. You know, when it's super dark, right before it gets light, And then as it turns light, the shadows begin to play tricks on you. You're not sure what you see and what you don't see. Maybe you know if you've been up all night working on a project, maybe something for school or something for your family or some event that's going on and you're up all night long. By the time you get to 4 o'clock in the morning, you get a little silly. You know, you're a little sleepy, you're not sure if you're awake or you're not, and you start to see things and don't see things, and you're not sure what's going on, and you know that you need some rest. Well, no doubt as those disciples are in that boat being tossed about, they didn't sleep that night, and so at the 4th watch in the middle of the morning, they are awake, and they are tired, and their mind and their eyes are playing tricks on them. And they think they see Jesus coming across the water. But they think it's a ghost because the mind says it couldn't possibly be. Our eyes are playing tricks on us. And they're all frightened. And Peter, never knowing what he's saying, never knowing what he's doing, he says, all right, I got this figured out. I'll prove to the rest of the folks in this boat that I'm not afraid. And I'll prove to them that what's out there isn't real at all. So here we go. All right, if it's really you, Jesus, tell me to come to you across the water. And you know, Peter is real confident right now that there's nothing out there at all. And so he stands there, I'm sure, with his arms folded. Tell me to come to you. And the voice comes back. Come. Come. I dare you. Come. You know, it was one of those moments where then Peter was caught. Because if he stayed in the boat, because he was afraid, he would never have the respect of those other disciples. If he got out of the boat, then he wasn't really sure what was going to happen. But he had no choice. He had to get out of the boat. And so he starts out, you know, as we all do in those occasions, a little confident, a little scared, and with his eyes set, he goes toward Jesus. But like many of us, when we're in those situations, we realize literally we've gotten in over our heads. We get scared. We get distracted. We get frightened. And then we look for a way out. But Peter had only one way out, and that was Jesus. And so Peter cries out, Lord, save me. Save me. And he reaches out. Jesus reaches out, grabs his hand, and saves him. And they get in the boat, and Jesus says, oh, you have little faith. Now, church, I'm confused by this passage. Because Jesus says to Peter that he has little faith, right? But in other passages in the Gospels, we hear that all we need is mustard-sized faith. Just a mustard seed of faith is all that we need. So what is going on in this passage? What we don't hear in the Scriptures is maybe the rest of that phrase Jesus would have said. Jesus says, O ye of little faith in me. You see, Peter had faith, but at that moment, when he took his eyes on Jesus, where did he place his faith? Not in Jesus, but in himself. It wasn't that Peter didn't have faith, but he didn't have faith in Jesus. He had faith in himself at that moment, and that, I believe, sisters and brothers, is what caused him to sink and to falter. Because he didn't have his heart, his mind, his eyes, his spirit fixed on Jesus. It was all on himself. Thinking that he could walk on water. Thinking that he could get out of the boat. Thinking that he would be able to do all these things. That he would be a source of pride in the eyes of the disciples. That he would be all that, and they would finally listen to him. Well, he was in for quite a surprise. And as he got back in that boat with those disciples and those 12 baskets full of food left over that they were taking home to their families, he finds himself confronted with that reality. That he didn't have his heart and his mind focused on Jesus as he needed. You and I, sisters and brothers, might find ourselves in such similar situations in the course of our lives. And as we go through our lives and our experience, we start out all confident, and we think we got our mind fixed on the Lord. We think our mind is fixed on holy things. We think we're set on righteous things until we get into the middle of the mess. And we get scared. We get frightened. We get overcome by all the things that are going around us. And before we know it, we start to sink. And if we're not careful and we don't keep our wits about us, then we start looking for help to pull us out of the sinking water that we're in all the wrong places. We find ourselves overwhelmed by the relationship stuff and family stuff and things at work, and we come home at the end of the day and we say, I just had enough. I just need to relax for a little bit. And what do? We just pour ourselves a little drink. It tastes good. Well, maybe just one more. Maybe just one more. And feeling good that evening turns into feeling bad the next morning. Because we think we found a way to take care of our business. We got those aches and pains and we go to the doctor and they give us all these pills and they really don't know what they're talking about anyway. They're just trying to get our money. And so we read the pills and what it's supposed to say, well, it says take one. That's it. I'm taking two because I am really aching today. And then tomorrow we find we take 3 and 4 and so on until we find that we're dependent upon these pills to overcome our pain and our suffering. We find ourselves looking for love and meaning in all the wrong places and in all the wrong relationships. We think that being with someone and sexing someone is going to take care of all of my wants and needs and desires and take away my loneliness. Well, church, it doesn't work that way. And then we find ourselves the day after. Now, you're all laughing because I think there's a little discomfort when we talk about this kind of stuff. But we look for all these things that will take away our pain, that will take away our suffering, that will overcome our discouragement. And we find ourselves looking in all the wrong places. The only place we need to look is the place where Peter needed to look, and that's Jesus. Because there's nobody who's going to be there in the morning like Jesus will. There's nobody who's going to be able to take care of us in our pain without a hangover and without dependency that is going to lead us down that path. Now, there's only one person that can do those things for us, and that's Jesus. That's Jesus. And so today, church, we're being asked very clearly by the Scriptures to keep our hearts and our minds and our eyes fixed and set on Jesus. No matter what's going on around us, no matter what's happening in the world, no matter what we see going on, you and I need to stay focused. We need to stay clear about who we are and whose we are, how we've been called, how we have lived, how God has brought us already through so many trials and tribulations, how God is going to continue to bring us through, but we got to keep our minds and eyes fixed on God, because if we don't, we're going to sink. And worse than sinking, we're going to drown. And in that, we find ourselves dependent on ourselves, like Peter. And if we do that, we know that we'll be lost. Today, we're invited to hear once again the invitation of Jesus to come. Come across the water. Come across whatever frightens you. Come through whatever hinders you. Come through whatever prevents you from being the person that you are. And if you keep your eyes fixed on me, I'm going to bring you through. But don't be looking to your left and to your right. Don't be concerned about what your neighbor's doing over here. Don't be concerned about what your children are doing over there. Don't be concerned about what your sister or brother are doing over there. Be concerned about what I have in store for you. to stay focused. And it's hard to stay focused in this day and age. You watch TV and whatever it just takes your mind where it shouldn't be. We listen to the radio and, I've given up on 107. I can't do it. I just can't do it. I just can't do it. So yes, I am part of the old fogey crowd on 93. I've officially admitted it to myself, and I'm okay. It's okay. But everywhere we look, there are things that can distract us, And as I'm thinking now, this week, thinking of all the young folks getting ready to go to school, all of our young adults, our young women, young men going off to college for the first time. We're going back to college. We've taught them. We've done what we can. We've raised them the best we can. We shared with them our faith, our belief, our values, what's important to us. We do the best that we can, and we send them off, and we put them in the hands of God. There is that commercial where on the one hand everyone's crying and tearful in the roadway as the children go off to school, and as soon as they make their way down the road, the folks are going up measuring the room for the hot tub and the game room, all those things. We can get caught up in all of that stuff, but sisters and brothers, for our young people who are going off to school, it is such a challenge these days. It is such a challenge because they're caught in between this wanting to go to school and advance their career and plan for their future, but also realizing, wow, I'm away from home. I can do whatever I want. I can stay up all night. I can sleep all day. I can run with my friends. I can do all these things. All this stuff that no one else needs to know about back home. But to our folks going off to school, unless you keep your minds and your hearts and your eyes and your thoughts and your actions fixed on Jesus, you're not going to make it. You're not going to make it. Because there will be too many folks around you who want to lead you astray. Come to this party. Come to that party. Do this, do that. You don't need to worry about class. All you got to do is show up and just take the final. I've had that teacher before. Don't worry about a thing. And we find that the rules changed from last year to this year. And at the end of the year, there might be precious little to show for being away from home and trying to begin a new life, a new career. Sisters and brothers, whether we're young, whether we're older, whether we find ourselves in our retirement years, all of us are reminded today to keep our lives and our hearts and our minds and directions focused on the Lord. As we look around to us and what's going on, just the other day as we heard the tragic loss of 20 of our Navy SEALs who made the supreme sacrifice for our nation. As we hear of the precarious financial situation we now find ourselves in as a country, and the bickering going on in Washington continuing about who's at fault and what should be said and not said, all of those things can make us want to just give up. We might want to, like Elijah, run off to a cave somewhere and not be bothered. We might, like Jesus, want to go to the mountaintop and just have some peace and quiet. But sisters, brothers, even should we do that, like Elijah, like Jesus, we have to come back down. We have to get back to our everyday demands. We have to tend to our responsibilities. We have to tend to our children, our parents, our families, our jobs, our faith community. All of those things require our attention. And if you and I make a commitment today to stay focused on Jesus in all that we do, if we wake up in the morning and make sure that our mind is fixed on Jesus. If you need to in the morning, if it's a difficulty to stay focused and to arrange your life like that, go get some holy cards with the face of Jesus, put it on your bathroom mirror. When you get up in the morning, the first face you see next to yours is that of our Savior. Keep Jesus always in our minds, before our eyes, and in our hearts. And whatever we do, whatever tempest, whatever sea we find ourselves on, we'll hear Jesus' words, come to me. Come across the difficulty. Come across the challenge. Come across the burdens that you have. But keep your eyes fixed on me, and I will never let you drown. Today, we have a great example in Peter. A reminder to us all that if we can stay focused on the Lord, there is no task, there is no difficulty so great. Oh, we may not walk on water today, but we will find ourselves crossing over to the other shores into everlasting life. Amen.